Okay. Documents.
Thank you for joining us, Chariclea. We are going to hear her presentation about language impairment in Parkinson's disease. She's an experienced speech-language pathologist specializing in adult language and communication disorders. She has a strong background in mental health care, working closely with patients and caregivers, and offering medical coaching to support recovery, improve communication, and enhance overall well-being. Whenever you're ready, we're happy to hear your presentation. I can also add that she also holds a master's degree in linguistics from University of Patras in Greece and master's in health management from University in Rome, Italy, and she integrates her academic knowledge, patient-centered, holistic approach to her work. We're happy to have you today.
Okay. I have a problem because I have the presentation in my Mac laptop, and I'm trying to share my desktop. Okay, no.
You can use below in the screen, you see various icons. So there is one icon with one row that says share. Arrow,
Yes.
sorry. Press this and press the entire screen. Screen 1 or screen 2, whatever you want.
I try desktop. No. So. Sorry. Okay. I think I have to connect it with my other laptop. Sorry. I don't know why this happened. Okay, I have it, but I can't share it.
You can try sharing the other screen.
Yes, I try. This is what I'm trying. Oh. Share? Which is no, different shares.
Yeah,
We
this is
can see
probably
now
the
your
first
screen, so you need to, we can see your screen now, so you need to
Okay.
open now your presentation.
I think we are here.
Yes, you can put it full screen if you like.
Full screen.
Click on προβολή διαφανειών.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fantastic. Perfect. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for your help. Okay.
Yes.
So thank you for the presentation. And as you see, my topic is language impairment in Parkinson's disease. And I have two big questions. Why language impairment and why Parkinson's disease? Well, first of all, I will answer why Parkinson. Parkinson's disease is one of the most common chronic neurodegenerative disease based on dopamine deficiency and is considered the second most frequent after Alzheimer. And with over 10 million active cases and 1 million new diagnoses per year. The global prevalence of Parkinson continues to rise due to increased life expectancy. Of course, first we have to understand Parkinson disease, and the pathogenesis and pathophysiology of the disease involve an interplay of genetic susceptibilities and environmental exposures, and is characterized by a progressive loss of dopaminergic neurons in the substadia nigra and the presence of Lewy bodies, leading to central nervous system degradations. But As we see here to the Parkinson's disease timeline, there is a wide range of symptoms and pathology before and after the clinical onset. As you see here, okay. According to Bragg staging, Parkinson's disease, the first two, see here, the first two stages associate with the appearance of prodromal non-motor symptoms in the domain of olfaction, smell, autonomic function, and sleep. At stage 3, as you see here, there are other brain function may become impairment, causing further sleep disorders, depression, and as well as prodromal motor features. At stage 4, thalamus is the point at which clinical diagnosis occurs and involves the appearance of clinical apparent motor symptoms such as tremor, bradykinesia, muscle rigidity. And at stage 5, okay, is characterized by poor balance, falls, and cognitive impairment. At stage 6, the patient is physically disabled and cognitive impairment may have progressed to Parkinson's disease dementia. And this, where we can see, here, that there is a significant point when every stage starts, or stops. Okay, what we know that now is that the pathogenesis of the disease begin decades before the manifestation of phenotypic symptoms. The primary symptoms, as I said, is tremor, rigidity, bradykinesia, postural instability. Reliance on these physical symptoms leads to late detection because these symptoms do not present until around 80% neural degradation. Therefore, in some clinical evaluations, lead to misdiagnosis, particularly on the onset of the disease. And on the other hand, there is no exact procedure for a definitive diagnosis. And as we saw before, language impairment can present in the prodromal phase and precede motor symptoms, suggesting that linguistic models can be used to detect Parkinson's disease. So, could speech and language be a biomarker in early diagnosis and monitoring Parkinson's disease? This is a big question, and of course, there are changes, as we saw in speech, and at the very beginning stages of disease, we saw that there is differences and difficulties in prosody. But let's say what is prosody. Prosody of speech plays an important role in verbal communication and encompasses various aspects of spoken language, such as intonation, length, stress, and rhythm. Prosodic information enables listeners to distinguish between different sentences, modalities, and make different inferences about the meaning based on listeners' tone. So here we have linguistic prosody and emotional prosody. Linguistic prosody enables listeners, all of us, to distinguish between statement and question. And emotional prosody allows a neutral statement can express positive or negative through the tone of voice. Therefore, accurate processing of prosody is crucial in communication in communication, since encounters can be interpreted positively or negatively, and this makes prosody a powerful contextual modularity of verbal content. And here there are significant, as we see, speech characterized across Parkinson's disease stages. There are significant differences in linguistic abilities across different stages, and with early stage patients performing better than those in late stages. And this shows the progressive nature of language impairments as the disease advances. Of course, we know that normal aging affects prosody perception. And health older adults scores are significantly lower than middle-aged adults in linguistic discrimination and naming. But these two groups have no significant difference in emotional prosody. But when we're talking about Parkinson's disease groups, sorry, okay, sorry, okay, here. But when we're talking about Parkinson's disease groups, we know that there are differences in all stages of prosody. For example, there is a study of Trotz et al. In 2012 that suggests that impairments in linguistic prosody occurs in Parkinson because of amygdala's role in the processing of linguistic prosody, in addition to the potential deficit in the control of additional resources. Albuquerque reported that individuals with advanced Parkinson's disease presented worse results than controls of emotional prosody. When they were asked to select the emotion that was conveyed by the intonation. Another study investigated the ability to identify the emotional prosody in individuals with Parkinson and showed that these people had lower than average performance. As we see, there is strong correlation as the disease goes on and perception of prosody getting worse. Of course, there is a neurological basis of prosody, and what we see is that we know that Parkinson's disease is caused by reduced dopamine in the basal ganglia that affect the prosody processing, and subcortical structures are involved in emotional processing and explain deficits in emotional prosody perception. And the connection between basal ganglia and the limbic system, which is the center of emotion, explain the observed defects in emotional prosody perception. What are the clinical implications and conclusions? Of course, we know that normal aging affects linguistic prosody, discrimination, and naming. But when we are talking about Parkinson, we know that it impairs all the aspects of prosody. And we need 100% in clinical attention for treatment, treatment should address both motor and prosody perception for better quality of life. And all this, as we said, communication involve communication because it's one of the most important functions, and loss of ability to communicate have a crucial effect on our life. What we know from the studies is that dysarthria, which is an acoustic impairment, is estimated to occur in 90% of Parkinson's disease patients. This percentage of patients who have language impairment is another subject of ongoing research, and the etiology of language deficits is not definitive. Research has correlated cognitive impairment to language impairment in Parkinson and has estimated cognitive impairment to occur in 80 to 100% of cases. Of course, language deficits in Parkinson have been characterized by reduced information, impaired grammatically, disrupted fluency, reduced didactic complexity. For example, individuals with Parkinson produce language that contains fewer correct information, more grammatical errors, less complex didactic structures compared to healthy. They also exhibit difficulties in generating verbs, producing longer sentences, and including more pauses and hesitation in speech. So we have different subtypes of linguistic cognitive profiles, and these different subtypes exhibit unique characteristics. As we see, the second subtype shows greater speech impairment compared to the first, and the two last subtypes are associated with the age of onset of the disease and genetic variants. So, could speech and language be a nearly biomarker? Yes, the answer is yes, because in clinical application is non-invasive, is a low-cost effective screening tool. We can monitoring the disease, and we have tracks progression and response to treatment. We can distinguish Parkinson from other atypical syndromes, and of course, as we saw at the very first slides, speech impairments can precede motor symptoms by up to a decade. Of course, we have different evaluation methods for speech and language, and standardized tests and different methods and parameters. But what we need to know is that 99% of Parkinson's disease patients with speech disorders, only 3 or 400% receive speech treatment. And 10 years and more before motor symptoms, speech impairments can precede traditional symptoms. We have 78% detection accuracy using language models and analysis. And future research should focus on a holistic approach to understanding speech and language changes in Parkinson, integrating both motor and cognitive linguistic metrics. Incorporating speech and language pathology into standard Parkinson's disease care is recommended, with emphasis in early intervention and continuous monitoring. So, what we have to remember is that addressing the late detection of Parkinson's disease requires a multifaceted approach that includes the development of reliable biomarkers, advanced diagnostic methods, including linguistic analysis. Recognize the complex interplay of motor and language impairment is crucial for timely intervention and improve patients' outcomes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Chariklia. It was an amazing presentation. Actually, the Parkinson disease as a neurodegenerative disease, it's not, let's say, expected at the first hand to have, let's say, language disorders. But apparently, there is also a problem there, and hopefully we have the speech therapists that can help on this direction. Let me ask you, all the presentations that you have presented so far, do you think that there is also an application, and a good application, I mean, to other neurodegenerative diseases?
That is the problem. That there are different application for different diseases, and as I show you, there are different aspects of language where we investigate.
Yes.
And we don't have results that can compare.
Of course, the individual variability in these diseases is high because it has to do with which areas of the brain are affected and where we see mostly the degeneration, let's say that. So this is, let's say, pretty logical.
And there is another problem with the language. It depends on the language. For example, there are many studies in European languages, but not in Asian.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we don't know what are the results and how we compare and standardize these results.
I see. Okay. So there is one question from Professor Mavritsaki.
Hello, a very great presentation. Thank you very much. I have a question that is slightly linked with some work that I'm presenting later. So I wanted to ask at which stage you can see attention problems in in Parkinson's, and because we have done some work on simulating differentiation. And that comes to what Manuso said earlier, differentiation between Alzheimer's and Parkinson's based on attention, because they demonstrate differences in the easy and difficult search that we measure in visual attention.
Okay. In language, when we have only acoustic, when we have acoustic tests only without vision, pictures, we see that there are differences from the early stage prodromal and at the first two stages. So we are talking about 10 years before the clinical onset. But what is important in communication is the message. So they ignore these symptoms. They ignore the differences in speech, the intonation, the length, because they focus on the message they are trying to transfer. And that's why we don't understand until we have tremor, bradykinesia, and all the other.
May I add something about studies? Thank you very much. About studies in Asia, for example, some work, there's a lot of work on cultural differences, especially in cognitive processes, and we have done some work on picture perception and attention. And we also use the model to perhaps predict how those differences might be different, might be affected diagnosis for patients that had stroke in areas related to attention. And basically, patients that have that come from Asia will anyway exhibit slower reaction times than patients that come from UK, even if they don't have basically effects in attention because of the cultural differences. And this hasn't been taken into account in current diagnosis and rehabilitation. So do you think that might be a case for Parkinson's as well?
Well, it depends what we study. For example, if we study prosody, as I presented to you, no, because there are objective features, so they are according to their mother language. But
Okay.
when we study pictures or other or conversational, maybe we have the same differences and the results are not reliable. So that was about my presentation. It was about objective features of language, which is prosody in mother language.
Thank you. And it is difficult to standardize across different cultures to be able
Yes.
to study. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Manas, you're on mute.
I'm speaking by myself only. So, okay, thank you very much. So, in the next hour, we are so glad to have Irena Danilovska with us. She's going to present us talk about the personality profiles of successful entrepreneurs, corporate managers, and aspiring entrepreneurs, so as to see their differences. Let's say that if there are any differences. And this is for 1 hour. And then we have, let's say, after the presentation, we have a stop for some questions and so on. And then again, Irena who is going to give us about how we can decode success from behavioral and neural signatures for startup founders in high stakes. Irena, would you like to merge these three presentations in one, or you would like to have it as we have it in two presentations?
We can go even in one because it's continual, but I think that Irini was in front of me. I don't mind going, but I don't know. I don't want to take her slot.
I'm sorry, because it's okay. I'm really sorry for that.
Similar names.
Text you.
No, Irini, I'm really sorry because in my eyes, it's the visual attention. This was a big slot, so my eyes went directly there. So I'm really sorry for that. Next presentation is by Professor Mavritzaki. And let me, let's say, present you Professor Mavritzaki, who is a professor in the Birmingham. Wait a second, please. I have my notes here. Do I have Irene for you? I don't know. No. Anyway, she's a professor of psychology. I know it on my as it is in the Birmingham City College. Did I say correct?
Birmingham City University.
Birmingham City University, sorry, yes. And she's working on modeling. And today we are going to see about the spiking neural modeling. So, Irene, thank you very much for joining us and for accepting our invitation. We are pretty keen to listen to your talk.
Yeah, I need to find a way to share it.
So yes, just a second. Hariklia should stop sharing. Let me try to see if I can make it by myself. To stop sharing, stop participant sharing. Okay. Now, Irene, below you will find the green button where you can share.
So just close a few windows. Okay, so let me please.
Would you like some help?
Yeah, I'll start. No. I selected the screen.
Okay, now
Can you see
probably
anything?
we can see your screen right now. So if you open the presentation in this screen,
Yeah, sorry. It's blocking, the one is blocking the other. So let me stop sharing and change screens. Because I have two screens, I'm just
yeah,
trying
I understand. I know the
Yeah,
problem with this.
that is the problem. And because okay, this is the screen I want to share. Now I'm sharing. Is that better?
We cannot see something so far.
Yeah, I need to click share. Can you see now?
Yes, this is much better. We see full screen your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the invite, and it's a pleasure to be here. When I was thinking of what I was going to present today, I thought, why don't I start with something that, why don't I present something that somehow it's losing interest today, and like spiking neuron, spiking neuron, integrate and fire neurons, and spiking neuron simulations. As a lot of work is nowadays focusing more on machine learning. I'm not, with the presentation, I'm not trying to demonstrate that this is the best approach. I actually, in fact, I'm moving towards using machine learning as well. But what I want to say that this is an approach that perhaps can solve different kind of problems that machine learning is solving. And this is basically what I would like to show you today. Before I start my presentation, of course, I need to thank all the people that have contributed to the work that I'm presenting today and the continuing work that I'm doing in this area. First, I would like to start by thanking Professor Clint Humphreys, which unfortunately left us in 2016. But this work that I'm presenting today is work that we started together in 2003. And in this journey, we collaborated very closely with Gustavo Deco from Pompeu Fabra University in Spain. And big parts of this work are also in collaboration with Professor Harriet Allen, University of Nottingham. That's for the basics and the basic model that I'm going to present today. And then the example that I'm going to give you of some recent publication that we had is in collaboration with Panagiotis Rintzelas in UCL and Stephanie Chua in Birmingham City University. And we are continuing this work with Professor Zoe Kurzi on perceptual learning in University of Cambridge. Further application of this work are done at the moment with Dr. Silvia Aldrovanti on decision making and Emma Bridger in University of Leicester. And another aspect that we're working together again in this group of work is ADHD and FASD, and using basically the computation model to understand these conditions and differentiation between these two conditions. And we're working very closely on that with Virginia Manatido in Worcestershire and Health and Care Trust. And of course, a big thank to my PhD students that are focusing their work on computation modeling, which is Todd Capes, Jennifer Klein, and Ethan Myers. So the presentation is going to be separated into two main parts. I'm going to start by providing some basic information. I'm not going to go in depth here because there is no time to explore and present all the details on spiking neural network and the spiking search over time and space model that I'm focusing on today. And then I'm going to continue on presenting the model, how it answers the first questions that we have started answering in cultural differences in attention. This area is not using computation modeling traditionally, and this is pretty much the first, to our knowledge, the first this kind of approach to using modeling to answer questions in the area. So, so when we simulate an experiment, we first build a computation model that is using mathematical models as well as computer programs. These models simulate neural interactions that aim to produce specific brain processes. And this can be done by focusing on specific brain areas or by examining basically more higher level interactions between different brain areas to simulate specific brain functions. So the examples that we're going to see today are actually focusing on this category. If you call it category, because I'm just presenting here a subset of work that is done. So in this category, what we really do is we have an experiment that is done in cognitive psychology, and based on all the research that has been done in the area, based on the assumptions and the findings, we actually build a computation model that aims to produce the behavior that the cognitive psychology experiments are producing. So the spiking search over space and time model that I'm going to base this work today is based on the visual search experiments and a small extension of them, the traditional ones, the easy and difficult visual search, and the visual, the preview, as we call it, that demonstrates the visual marking effect, which is more examining the temporal aspects of visual search. So in the easy experiment, which is this one called single feature search, single feature experiment, we have we ask the participant to identify in the screen a target, which is the blue H in this case, amongst a set of distractors. And the participant basically sees a number of stimuli. The target is presenting left and right, and also a number of items on the screen, and we average the reactions across these trials, and we measure then the average reaction time for each participant in each display size and how successful the participants are. This is the first one. We call it easy search because the target shares one common characteristic with the target, and is only one set of distractors with a distractor, and there is only one set of distractors. So here we have H, blue H, and blue A's, and the common characteristic is the color. But we also have the more difficult one, which is a conjunction that they share different common characteristics with two sets of distractors, as you can see here. And we find that the single feature is much easier than the conjunction. And you can see that easiness in the results where you have high reaction times in conjunction in comparison to single feature, small reduction in success rate. And when you look at the slopes, when you look basically on how the reaction times increase as we increase the number of items that we present on the visual field, you can see that in single feature the increase is very small, while in the conjunction is much bigger, resulting in a steeper slope. When we investigate the visual search over time using the preview, we present one set of distractors for a period for around 1 second. and then the full screen of the difficult search. And what we find is that if that half presentation of the screen, of the total screen is presented as I described, the search, the preview search, actually resembles the performance of the easy search. So all of these were examined using a computation model that is using spiking search over time and space, the spiking search over time and space model that is using spiking neurons, which are the integrate and fire neurons. The neurons in the model basically are the properties that I'm not going to provide a lot of information here. They're actually focusing on the properties that are represented in Brunel and Wang and Deco and Rolls. And they do have excitatory and inhibitory currents. So it's so what we assume in the model is that we have a group of neurons with these properties that are interconnected with a way that is based on previous literature, based on cognitive models that are explored previously. And those neurons are connected with about 800 other neurons from other brain areas. And these other 800 neurons convey information from the outside world to our system and excite them, and excite the specific neurons that are related to the task that we are investigating. So the network organization follows this organization where we have a number of layers, and each layer has excitatory and inhibitory neurons. Each one of these feature maps encode different characteristics of the stimuli. So we have a feature map for color, a feature map for shape, and so on. And also each one of these feature map has feature dimensions. So we have the color blue, the color green, and so on. And we have the shape A, the shape H. And we have global inhibition in the system. You can see the small pools here of neurons that are about 100 neurons each that are tightly connected. And the connection with other pools is loose connection, and they're not connected with other neurons in the other feature dimension maps. The only connection is through the connectivity they have in the location map, where basically each position is interconnected with the corresponding position in the location map. All of these maps have the same system of global inhibition, and they have a winner-take-all system. So this organization follows previous literature and models from previous literature. So it follows the feature integration theory by Drisman and Gelade, the guided search by Wolf. The saliency map that we see here, the location map, is actually demonstrating the saliency map that we can see in E.T. and Hoch. And we have the visual marking as it is presented by Watson and Humphreys. The model, although it simulates a search, which is the difficult conjunction search that a lot of researchers suggest that is serial, meaning that we attend to an item at a time until we find the target, while in the easy one, we just attempt all the items at the same time. However, the processing that we're using here is parallel, and we are able to simulate even the serial search in this process. So using this model, we were able to simulate the behavior that we have seen in behavior data, where we have the easy search, and you can see that the reaction times are smaller than the conjunction search, and you can see that the preview resembles the profile of the single feature search condition. So this is the basic model that we simulated that was first simulated in 2006. And following that work, we simulated the visual marking and the effects of brain lesion. And there is a lot of work that we have done on that on stroke patients. Simulated the arousal effects by altering the NMDA current characteristics in the model. We developed a model-based analysis approach for fMRI data that allows us to understand the role the temporal parietal junction had in the visual marking. We also worked on Alzheimer's disease and the role of acetylcholine in that. We have done, linked to the previous presentation, we have done some work on differentiating between Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And we also currently continue on that work, and we have worked on cross-cultural differences in attention, which I'm presenting here the basic work, but there are a lot of extension of that work. So on cultural differences in attention, just presenting the problem that we want to investigate further, is that there is a lot of research that demonstrate that collectivists, which are the East Asian cultures, have different way of identifying, of looking at the pictures than individualists, which are basically the Western Europeans and American cultures. So what happens is that collectivists tend to focus on the link between the relationship between the objects on the visual field, while individualists tend to focus on the focal point, if we call it salient item, which is a stronger visual item that is present on the visual field. That difference is demonstrated with a lot of work from Masuda and Nisbet and Kitayama, where basically they have worked on a study where Americans and Japanese were shown a video of some fishes, basically underwater, and were asked to describe the scene. Americans reported less contextual information than Japanese. And when the background was changed, Americans noticed small differences in the background, while Japanese were not. Were affected by the differences in the background. Further work on this in the cognitive, more on the cognitive side now, has done by Ueda and colleagues, where they present some visual search tasks, and they presented a long line along shorter lines, and a short line along long lines. And they did that in high and low intensity displays. And they noticed that you can see here the results. I hope that you can see that. And notice that North Americans were overall quicker to find the long line. And they were overall quicker than the Japanese. And you can see that they were more sensitive to the saliency of the items that were presented on the screen. So basically, they were quicker to find the long line, while they were not as quick to find the shorter line that was less salient. And Japanese were not sensitive to that change. And at the same time, you can see that the lines for Japanese were steeper than the North Americans. So this has to do, therefore, all this previous research suggests that this is related with how the saliency of the objects that are presented on the visual field are perceived by the different cultures. And there is a lot of work that has suggested that actually this might be due to changes in the early processing, which actually supports the same idea of the perceived saliency. So taking that on board, we wanted to investigate using the spiking search over time and space model. If we apply similar changes to the model, will we get the same results? And therefore move a step forward in saying, okay, this might be actually one of the reasons, not necessarily the other reasons, but this might be one of the reasons that we see that difference. So I'm going to provide a little bit more details now about the modeling that I haven't provided earlier, so you understand exactly how this takes place. So let's say that we simplify in the modeling in order to be able to simulate it, because it's a big number of neurons and there is a big number of equations that need to be solved. Therefore, it's very computationally expensive to use bigger displays. So we simulate displays up to 6 items. And basically, if we have, for example, a triangle, we're using shapes in all the research, and we have done some behavior studies as well in cross-cultural difference in attention. We are using shapes because we want the stimuli to be culture invariant. We don't, and therefore, basically, we don't use the H and A that we had before. So the target here is the blue triangle amongst green squares, and it is slightly more salient than the rest of the items that are presented. So simplifying the model that we've seen earlier, we have the layers and the feature maps and the feature dimensions. So we have the feature layer for shape and the feature layer for color. And we have the group of neurons for each position. And each group of neurons is linked with strong coupling, with strong connections and low connectivity for different group of neurons that simulate different positions of the visual field. And each position is interconnected with the corresponding position in the saliency map. The oval shapes demonstrate the inhibitory pools, and this demonstrates a pool of neurons that are in the brain area, but they're not related with a link with the task that we are focusing on. And they're all connected basically with similarly to the inhibitory pool with all the pools in the feature maps. So when the external neurons send us a signal that there is an item present on the visual field, the corresponding positions are activated in the model. So, for example, in this example here, we have blue squares in these positions. So we have the square activation, the blue activation for all of them, because all of them have the color blue. And we have the triangle in this position, and this position is activated with higher frequency, basically, in this. So I don't have it here, but bear in mind, but that the model knows, as the subject knows, that the blue triangle is the target. So how do they know? All the neurons in the triangle and blue map receive slightly higher activation. Not the corresponding position, all the neurons in the map. So through winner take all, basically, and through the connectivity, at the end, the position that corresponds to the target will win the competition in the saliency map. And the point that the activation profile of that position reaches a threshold, that point is recorded as the reaction time of that specific trial. We ran the model for a number of trials, for 20 trials. And if that position is the target, then that's a successful trial. If another position is crossing the threshold before that, then this is an unsuccessful trial. And that's how we match basically the behavior with the modeling data. So the results from a study, as I said earlier, the parameter, I didn't actually explain a lot earlier. So the parameter that we think that is related with how the neurons are perceived in our model, how the saliency of the neurons is perceived, is the coupling of the neurons of each pool that corresponds to position to each position. So if that coupling is strong, the input that they receive becomes stronger because of the stronger connection. So they're self-excitatory, basically, the pool. So if we reduce that coupling, then it's not as strong anymore, the input. So the strong input basically doesn't become stronger from that connectivity. So we tested that in the model by reducing that coupling to a percentage level for different percentage levels. the minus 14% actually reached a success rate that was below chance. So we didn't actually consider include it in further calculations. But you can see here for 2, 3, 4, and 6 items presented on the visual field that as we decrease that parameter, we see an increase in the reaction times and also an increase in the slopes. You see that they are steeper. And that increase in the slopes actually can be seen here in the results, where we see significant differences from the baseline, which we simulate as individualist, and different collectivist levels. This work is continuing. So this basically demonstrates that this is the first step to demonstrate that saliency might be one of the reasons that we see these differences in cross-cultural work. We have done more steps in simulating visual neglect, but we haven't actually presented it yet in a paper. Just to predict what I mentioned earlier, to see if basically there are differences cross-culturally in patients, and if this can be taken into account for diagnostic criteria in the future. I am collaborating with University of Oxford for this work, but we need to find cultural different cultural groups, which we haven't been able to identify yet. As we have more individualists at this stage. And as you know, it's very difficult to find the participants in these kind of studies. So the work that we continue in this area is work on simulated previous work on risky decision making, and that is basically with Aldrovandi and Bridger and Capes, and attention in ADHD, which is work that has just been completely, Jennifer just got her PhD and we're writing up this work. We're also working on differentiated between Filter-Algor syndrome disorder and ADHD, and we're starting on that by investigating risky decision-making in FASD. And cultural difference in perceptual learning. And we're also simulating EEG data in Alzheimer's disease. So therefore, spiking neural models allow us to simulate a wide range of problems and explore different pathologies, because the benefit they have is that they allow us to work in different levels, not only on the higher level, but also look at the low-level properties. At the same time, I'm not saying that we shouldn't use machine learning, because machine learning will help us answer other questions. And the plan and how I see it is use a combination of approaches to make sure that we have valid answers to our questions and to double check basically the answers that we get from this kind of research. Thank you. So.
Thank you very much, Irini. Thank you very much for this great talk. Is there any questions? If not, then we don't have so much time left. It's actually 1 o'clock exactly. So thank you very much, Irini. It was a pleasure to have you with us. It was an honor. Your work is amazing. And, as a mathematician, I love this kind of modeling. And when I hear presentations or I read papers, let's say, I feel, like I admire a lot this kind of work. Thank you very much again. So we continue with Irena Danilovska, who is a PhD student in the City College, the University of York. She's going to speak about how are we, if we are where to win, and she's going to unravel the personality profiles of successful entrepreneurs by comparing successful entrepreneurs, corporate managers, and aspiring entrepreneurs. So Irena, when you are ready, you can start.
Give me a second. I think I'm sharing the presenter screen. Am I right?
Yes. Yes.
Let's share the other one. I made it before. I tried it before and
So try to share your entire screen.
yes, but I want to share the extended screen. That's why. Okay. Yeah, I think now it's going to work.
Now we see some trees. Yes, that's perfect.
Yes. Okay, that's correct.
So thank you very much.
The presentation that I'm going to share today, it's about my work in the last couple of years, focusing on two main studies. Mainly because my interest came from the real world and about why entrepreneurship is so difficult, despite many people being interested in becoming entrepreneurs. And basically, the statistic says that more than 3 out of 4 startups fail, while we all know that startups drive innovation, jobs, and even entire economies. So they're really important. And only very small fraction of the startup founders manage to do it right. Despite investing a lot of money, energy, and hope poured into new investors, both on the side of the startup founders, but also public investors, private investors, and national funds. So this was the motivation behind working on this study and trying to develop and successfully developing a startup founder's success scale. It is a practical tool to help spot the founders who will most likely succeed. Unlike standard personality tests with broad inventory like Big Five, the Startup Founder Success Scale is built around the real-life experiences, characteristics, and the practices of successful founders. Instead of relying on outdated theories not applicable in real life, we went straight to the source in order to develop the questionnaire, the inventory. We've dug into the life experiences of 10 self-made billionaire founders, but we also talked initially with 25 of the world's most experienced VC investors and mentors. And we asked them what actually made the difference. What were the characteristics that they were noticing among the startup founders whom they mentored, in whom they invested, and what were characteristics that transpired through their entire journey. So we first, by being identified by being we developed these questionnaires by performing these interviews. We also spoke with experienced serial entrepreneurs who developed a couple of different and successful companies during their career, and based on this, we refined our initial inventory through feedback from experts and lay panels. So finally, the questionnaire was administered over a period of a couple of years to over 10,000 participants across multiple countries in US, Europe, and Asia. So this was a very big sample. And it included successful startup founders, over 6,000, then corporate managers, around 2,000, and aspiring entrepreneurs, 1,800. The successful startup founders, a primary group, were selected based on their demonstrated entrepreneurial success, using business-centric metrics that are unique to the startup world, and they are not same with small everyday businesses that you see next door, like barber shops, like flower shops, even accountants. the startup businesses are different type of business, the ones that have very high potential to scale across geographies and that can make very high value and very high return for its investors, but also can employ a lot of people and can make big economic difference for the countries. We started with evaluating the number of factors that we need to retain. The visual observation of the script plot showed that there is a presence of 6 factors according to both the distinct break or elbow and Kaiser greater than 1 rules, suggesting their significance as not trivial factors. However, the intersection of Eugen values from observed and random data indicated that only 5 factors met this criterion. However, we wanted to have more robust data and decided to proceed with fitting 6 factors for further analysis. This gave us we performed exploratory factor analysis to confirmatory factor analysis conversion approach. And during the exploratory factor analysis conducted on 1/2 of the total sample, we managed to determine the initial underlying latent factors. We observed 6 factors, which were explaining 71% of the variance. Further, we examined the relationship between the retained items using the Rowe-Pearson's correlation matrix, and the observed correlations not only validated the discernible groups of identified factors, but also provided additional information on the interdependencies among the retained items. As I mentioned, the exploratory factor analysis showed that the newly developed tool, the Successful Founders Startup Scale, explained 71% of the variance and was made of 6 key characteristics. Specifically, we defined them as based on the items that were in the questionnaire. We defined them as relentless resilience, which were the most pronounced factor, then value-creating opportunism, followed by intrinsic curiosity, courageous decision-making, strategic innovativeness, and transformational leadership. In other words, it's not just about being bold or optimistic, as often is believed. There is a specific combination of traits that truly matters. These traits were then validated by performing subsequent confirmatory factor analysis on the remaining 50% of the total sample. This allowed us to understand how these traits vary across the broader business landscape. And the CFA confirmed the model's applicability across different groups, establishing the robustness of our scale with a notable distinction in trait prevalence between successful founders and other participant groups like corporate managers and aspiring entrepreneurs. You can see that from the values in the confirmatory factor analysis table, but we'll see it in the following analysis as well. This is a short overview of what each of these factors means. So relentless resilience, usually people ask why relentless. So it's not just being resilient once and overcoming one obstacle. Being an entrepreneur day in and day out means that consistently you will need to face with challenging events, and continually you will need to keep up and continue working without losing your track. So it combines persistence, adversity recovery, and delayed gratification. The second one, value creating opportunism, emphasizes both the opportunity recognition and the value creation. The third one, intrinsic curiosity, it's about intrinsic knowledge pursuit in unrelated areas that not always gives benefits, and it's not always it's considered as not related with the primary area of one's work. So it's not because of your current job, but it's just because you want to learn new things. Courageous decision-making highlights the ability to navigate uncertainties and make tough decisions. very much important in the business world. Then strategic innovativeness aligns creativity with long-term strategic goals. So it's not being creative just for being creative, but actually creating in a way that will create business monetary benefit for your company. The transformational leadership incorporates visioning, empowering, and influence. And this is actually the sixth factor that we were thinking if to retain or not. And it had a little bit a less strong correlation with within the EFA. The reason we assume about this is because the successful entrepreneurs, unlike the corporate managers who usually go through structured managerial trainings and have more developed styles in a very similar way, the startup founders, most of them are self-made. So they usually didn't go to that fancy schools or fancy trainings, and they developed their leadership styles intrinsically. Usually they were just trying to solve a problem, not managing people. So they were leading by doing. Further, we performed regression factor score analysis in order to understand how the identified factors differ between our participant groups. It is working in a way that is standardizing factor scores to a mean of 0 and a standard deviation based on the squared multiple correlation between factors and variables. This method, unlike simple weighted sums, employs regression with observed item values as predictors, weighted by coefficients derived from matrix operations, including item loadings and factor correlations. It accounts for relative differences between factor scores and the directionality. So a positive score suggests a stronger and above average association with the corresponding factor, while a negative score in this indicates a comparatively weaker and below average association with that respective factor. In our regression factor score analysis, you can see the relative differences and directionality in this associations among the factor score for the 6 traits across our 3 participant groups. And you can observe that successful startup founders tend to have stronger positive association with all 6 factors, while the corporate managers and the aspiring entrepreneurs show varying degrees of comparatively weaker association with some of these factors. Specifically, that the contrast is surprisingly high, even between the successful startup founders and corporate managers, when it comes to their core entrepreneurial traits. While both groups show positive scores for a relentless resilience and transformational leadership, the startup founders consistently score much higher across all of the factors. This highlights the stronger alignment with the entrepreneurial mindset characterized by risk-taking, innovation, and a readiness to seize new opportunities. By contrast, corporate managers tend to score negatively on factors like intrinsic curiosity and value-creating opportunism, indicating a preference for stability and established practices rather than disruptive innovation or opportunistic value creation. Even where corporate managers show some overlap, such as in courageous decision-making and strategic innovativeness, their profiles remain more risk-averse and less dynamic than those of the founders. Overall, while corporate managers may share certain entrepreneurial attributes, these are generally less pronounced, underscoring the unique psychological and behavioral makeup of successful startup founders. When we're comparing, on the other side, the successful startup founders and the aspiring entrepreneurs, so people that plan to become entrepreneurs, this also reveals even more striking disparities, diverging from many assertions in the current theory that individuals contemplating starting a business closely resemble existing founders. It is similar as saying that if someone plans to get a PhD, it's good as done. And you all know that that's not the case. So the aspiring entrepreneurs consistently display significantly negative factor scores across all 6 principal factors, indicating comparably much weaker association with each trait. Notably, the aspiring entrepreneurs exhibit pronounced weak association with relentless resilience, transformational leadership, and strategic innovativeness, while their intrinsic curiosity is relatively less weak. So being curious is definitely very important component, but you need most of the other factors to actually succeed. The post hoc test also showed this group differs substantially from corporate managers. The observed significant differences raise the possibility that this is not the case for all aspiring entrepreneurs, but just because the ones that have the traits important to succeed are minority within our group of 1,800 aspiring entrepreneurs. So many among them may explore entrepreneurship due to necessity, unemployment, or non-entrepreneurial motivations. Often people, especially in less developed countries, they decide to become entrepreneur just because they cannot find a regular job. So it's because of fighting unemployment, and they don't have the right skills to actually build a startup. And sometimes they have completely different motives. Sometimes countries are giving big grants for someone starting a business, and a lot of people raise their hand and says, this is something that we want to do. But just by doing so, that doesn't make them entrepreneurs. And this scale and these results actually are showing the difference, and hopefully in future we'll be able to use it to identify these differences. Is there any questions so far?
Are there any questions? I don't see neither a raised hand nor a question in the Q&A. Nope.
Okay.
So Irena, you can continue.
In addition, following this study about the development of the startup founders success scale, I embarked on a harder journey to go towards gathering a new group of participants. In my case, it was 61 participants that I work with, 62, but one of the results is still not usable for technical reasons. So 61 participants are analyzed here. These 61 participants performed this successful startup founders scale, but also performed behavioral tasks in decision making that I'll present today. This is the task that I want to share with you today, that was performed by my group of respondents, is the multi-armed bandit task. In our experiments, the participants completed this computerized decision-making task, is often known as MAB task. In this paradigm, participants repeatedly choose between 6 different locations or arms displayed on the screen. These arms were divided into 2 color groups. 3 of the arms were red and 3 were blue. Each choice led to an immediate monetary outcome, which could have been positive, 0, or negative, depending on the arm that was selected. For the red arms, the possible outcomes were plus 200, 0, or minus 200. For the blue arms, the outcomes were plus 100, 0, or minus 100. At any given time, each arm had its own set of probabilities for these outcomes. Within each color, there was always one arm with a highly skewed probability towards the best outcome. one arm that was somewhat skewed with somewhat skewed probability towards suboptimal outcome, and one with a more random or uncertain payoff pattern. The task was divided into two main stages. In the first stage, it was the static stage. The probabilities associated with each arm remaining stable. So this allowed participants to learn which locations were more advantageous through repeated experience. However, in the second stage, the restless stage, when the arms were abruptly jumping, the probability could abruptly change or jump without warning. Importantly, these jumps happened more frequently for the red arms than for the blue, making the red locations especially volatile and unpredictable. This structure forced participants to continuously balance two strategies: exploitation versus exploration. Exploration meant trying out different arms to gather up-to-date information, especially after unexpected changes. Exploitation, on the other side, meant choosing the arm that seemed to offer the highest reward based on what they had learned so far, and especially in the static stage. Since the environment could change at any moment, especially for the red arms, participants had to remain flexible and adaptive rather than settling into a fixed routine. The primary objective for participants was to maximize their total monetary gain over the approximately 20-minute task. Doing so required not just learning from experience, but also being able to detect when previously successful strategies were no longer optimal due to the sudden changes in the reward structures. In this way, the task closely models a real-world decision-making situation where conditions can change unexpectedly and people must decide when to stick and what works and when to take a chance on something new. This task design was adjusted from Paisian and Lena Storr from 2012. In order to dive deeper into the findings and to understand how the participants actually traded exploration and exploitation, and to objectively distinguish between their explorative and exploitative choices that they made during the task, we employed a computational modeling approach inspired by Do et al. 2006. Specifically, we used the Kalman filtering algorithm to track the expected value and uncertainty of each arm on a trial-by-trial basis. Participant choice probabilities were modeled using a softmax choice rule, allowing us to identify for each decision whether it was more likely to be explorative, sampling a less certain or potentially suboptimal arm, or exploitative, choosing the best known option at the time. Initially, when analyzing all participants as a single group, we observed a strong negative correlation between the exploration rate and the total score. You can see the exploration rates on the x-axis and the total score on the y-axis, and you can see that there is a huge difference between the 61 participants. This means that across the whole sample, individuals who engaged in more frequent exploration tended to earn lower total rewards, a pattern consistent with the idea that excessive exploration in the context of a changing environment can be negative to performance. However, upon splitting the sample into successful startup founders and aspiring entrepreneurs, a more nuanced picture emerged. Although the two groups did not significantly differ in their average exploration rates, because even the aspiring entrepreneurs, some of them tend to explore more. The successful startup founders consistently achieved much higher total scores compared to aspiring entrepreneurs. I need to say that in this study, we didn't had three groups, but we had two groups. The first group was, again, the successful startup founders who objectively, by their real world achievements, were fitting into this group. And then the second group was aspiring entrepreneurs, regardless of their previous background. So here we had people that were coming from the corporate world, and they were at the age where they think they have enough knowledge and enough maybe financial security that they want to try their own idea. But we also have profiles that were more on the freelance side, or students, or people who already work in other startups. So that's why you can see this orange group of people. It's very different. While the green participants, the successful startup founders, tend to have more similar profiles. So when I was examining the correlation between the exploration and the score within each of these two groups, both again showed a negative relationship, but it is visible that is much more pronounced among the aspiring entrepreneurs. In this group, higher exploration rates were strongly associated with poorer performance, suggesting that aspiring entrepreneurs may engage in exploration that is less effective or more random, and therefore less likely to lead to optimal outcomes. So they were managing to have good score only when they were exploring less, when they were sticking more to the exploitation of the known arms. In contrast, among the successful startup founders, the negative correlation, although present, was substantially weaker. This suggests that successful founders either strike a more effective balance between exploring and exploiting, or that the exploration is more targeted and strategic, contributing positively to their overall outcomes. These findings highlight that the relationship between exploration and success is not simply about the amount of exploration, but rather about its quality and strategic usage. In summary, our results demonstrate that while both successful founders and aspiring entrepreneurs engage in exploratory behavior, only the former group appears to do so in a way that supports rather than hinders high performance in the dynamic decision environments. And if you can see, this is what I observed and confirmed with cluster analysis, although the sample is small for something like this. However, it's informative to see that what I mentioned before, the aspiring entrepreneurs have two distinct subgroup where they have bigger internal consistency and bigger difference than the neighboring groups. On the other side, the successful startup founders most of the participants were in their distinct profile. In addition, after completing the behavioral task, all 61 participants again responded to the startup founders success scale that was developed before, the questionnaire that I validated during my first study, as I already presented. When comparing the successful startup founders and the aspiring entrepreneurs, I found significant group differences in 4 of the 6 factors. Specifically, successful startup founders score substantially higher than the aspiring entrepreneurs on relentless resilience, value-creating opportunism, intrinsic curiosity, and courageous decision-making. These findings suggest that established entrepreneurial success is particularly linked with persistence in the face of adversity, a drive to recognize and seize new opportunities, a strong curiosity for learning, and the courage to make bold decisions. For the other 2 factors, the strategic innovativeness and the transformative leadership, there were no significant differences between these 2 groups. This pattern indicates that while innovative thinking and leadership may be important for both groups, the quality that most strongly distinguish successful founders from those still aspiring are resilience, opportunism, curiosity, and decisiveness. At this stage, no direct correlation have been conducted between participants' performance on the MAP task and their successful founders' score on this scale. However, my main research question and the ultimate goal of this PhD was to what extent do individual differences in the entrepreneurial personality traits as measured by the startup founder success scale and the behavioral task performance on the MAB task correspond to variability in neural activity and indexed by the ERP measures from the EEG recording that was performed during the multi-arm bandit task. So when I performed the correlation between their scores on the startup founder success scale to their results on the multi-arm and behavior on their multi-arm bandit task, I was able to see two distinctive, highly performing profiles. Profile one, I would identify like individuals with high intrinsic curiosity, strong interest in value creation, and high resilience, who tend to both explore more options and achieve higher scores. This pattern is characteristics of entrepreneurial thinking, where a willingness to try new things and pursue opportunities and persist despite setbacks combine to produce both active exploration and strong overall performance. And you can see on the correlation table that the high resilience was highly correlated with high score, while the high intrinsic curiosity was correlated with high exploration, but tend to lower the scores. So in order to have higher score, the individuals needed to also be persistent, not to be just curious. The second score, the second profile that emerged from this is participants who are less curious and less focused on value creation, but who are still highly resilient, also tend to achieve good performance. In other words, resilience alone can drive success, even if a person prefers to exploit known options rather than explore widely. This aligns more closely with an effective corporate approach that we've seen before, where consistent effort and the ability to push through difficulties matter most, regardless of exploratory tendencies. However, for world success, exploring unexplored options that are still not explored by others are where the successful entrepreneurs thrive, and it's actually from where the unicorn startup founders emerge, the ones that managed to create companies valuated to over $1 billion. The key takeaway from this correlation slide is that the relentless resilience is the key ingredient in both profiles for achieving high scores. High curiosity and high value creation can drive exploration and are especially important for the entrepreneurial path, as I mentioned, but they're not strictly necessary for high performance if resilience is strong. So depending of what kind of career one wants, and if he's more inclined or less inclined towards curiosity and value creation, he can still succeed if he have high resilience, but it will take him in a two different career path, one more towards corporate endeavors and the second one more towards entrepreneurial endeavors. Moving forward and having linked the psychological profiles and behavioral strategies to the performance of the multi-arm bandit task, I next turn to my third data stream, the EEG recordings captured throughout the decision-making task. This brainwave data allow us to directly observe the timing and the sequence of neural processes as participants encountered, evaluated, and responded to uncertain options. By analyzing the global field power, event-related potentials, time locked to key task events, which in this case were the options display, the making of the decision and the feedback, we can map out the neural signatures associated with perception, attention, feedback evaluation, and decision formation in real time. From the brain waves of the option display, we can see the perceptual and the attentional ERPs, the evoke-related potentials. The grand average ERP, time locked to the option display, revealed classic neural markers of the early perceptual and attentional processing. You can see that P1 and N1 peaks reflect rapid visual encoding and initial feature discrimination as participants scan their choices. These two ERPs are especially high given that we have 6 arm bandits in different colors with different options, and the second stage were dominating the task, the restless stage that were much more volatile with 150 trials compared to the static probabilities stage, which was the first stage with 50 trials. The most prominent response still was the P2 component, associated with active perceptual categorization and comparison between all these different alternatives. A P300 was present, but in my case, it was less pronounced, suggesting that most neural resources at this stage were engaged in early sensory and decision preparation rather than evaluating outcomes. I placed the grand average for the feedback right below, so you can observe these differences that I'm walking you through. So for the grand average on the feedback, we could see, I see that the wording is here wrong, but still I can make the description. You can see that the P1 and N1 are much lower in the case of the feedback, while the more pronounced peaks here are P2 and N2 followed by P300. Why is this the case? When the feedback is presented on the screen, they only focus on one of the arms that they already selected when they can see the feedback. So the screen is not cluttered in a way where they need to see everywhere, think, and make this decision. So it's more easily to perceive this information. And that's why I assume that P1 and N1 are less pronounced in this case. However, P2, when they are starting to categorize, to try to make sense of what this feedback means, as well as the N2, which is doubled with the feedback-related negativity, if they observed feedback that was unexpected, this ERP is also more pronounced. P300 is also important. It shows that when they saw this feedback, they are preparing for the basically for the next step, and they are adjusting their approach in the next trial. An interesting ERP here, it's the late positivity potential. In addition to the classic sequence of early and mid-latency components, the feedback-locked GFP here also exhibited the pronounced late positivity potential, beginning after 450 milliseconds, well beyond the 800 milliseconds, and it was especially prominent and amplitude peaking around 2 on 2 amplitude between 600 and 700 milliseconds. Such a sustained positivity is commonly associated with extended processing of motivationally significant or affectionately salient feedback, reflecting continued context updating, consolidation, or emotional evaluation in response to outcome information. The presence of this robust late positive signal suggests that participants not only detected and evaluated feedback rapidly, and as indicated by the earlier P2, N2, and P300, but also engaged in prolonged post-feedback processing, possibly integrated the outcome information for learning or future decision making. This extended late positivity is in line with prior literature describing that late positivity complex or sustained P3B in tasks involving significant feedback or reward, and highlights the importance of motivational salience in shaping the temporal dynamics of neurofeedback processing. I also managed to perform a correlation between the option display locked ERPs that we just saw with the behavioral performance on the task itself. What I found here is that the N2 amplitude, there was a strong positive correlation between the N2 amplitude and the total score, meaning that participants who showed a more pronounced N2 neuro response during the task tended to achieve higher monetary outcomes. This suggests that enhanced cognitive control and outcome monitoring, as indexed by the N2 ERP, are associated with better task performance. P2 amplitude, on the other side, was negatively correlated with the exploration rate, but positively correlated again with the total score. This means that the participants with larger P2 responses tended to explore less, but performed better overall. The P2 component is associated with perceptual categorization and attentional focus, suggesting that those who more effectively process the available options are less likely to engage in broad exploration and instead capitalize on the best choices. P2 latency, we also observe not only the amplitude, but also the latency aspect. And we can see that there is a strong negative correlation between the P2 latency and the exploration rate. In other words, earlier or faster P2 responses are linked to more exploration. This might indicate that participants who can rapidly categorize and respond to new options are more willing to try out different choices, reflecting greater cognitive flexibility. And finally, P300 amplitude shows a strong positive correlation with the total score. This means that participants with larger P300 responses tend to achieve higher scores. The P300 is traditionally associated with context, updating, and motivational significance, indicating that those who are more robustly process important decision outcomes are able to learn and adapt more effectively for better results. However, please have in mind that these results are for the overall group, so it's a within group analysis to correlate the options displayed locked ERPs with the behavioral performance on the multi-armed bandit task while their EEG was recorded. So I already said this, stronger neural responses, particularly in P2, N2, and P300 components, predict better decision-making outcomes and more efficient strategies in this multi-arm bandit task. Early and robust brain responses are markers for both higher performance and, in some cases, more strategic exploration, is a key takeaway. The analysis that I'm very interested in is the grand average and the following analysis that I'll need to do for the decision part of the decision-making process. Especially because much of the research on the neural basis on decision-making, particularly in context of entrepreneurship, managerial aspect, has focused on feedback-related ERPs, such as the feedback-related negativity, reward positivity, P300, and the late positivity potential. These signals evoked during the outcome evaluation have dominated the field because they align well with theories from psychology, neuropsychology, emphasizing learning from rewards, even neuroeconomics, emphasizing learning from rewards and punishments. Feedback is easy to measure and lends itself well to modeling adaptation in learning. However, there is a surprising lack of research examining ERPs linked to the decision moment itself. Yet in entrepreneurship, success often hinges not on how one processes feedback, but on how one navigates uncertainties and commits to choices, often in the absence of immediate, clear, or even any feedback. Decision-related ERPs, such as the centroparietal positivity, may provide neuromarkers of confidence, evidence accumulation, risk evaluation, and internal commitment, processes central to entrepreneurial success. I understand that one of the main reasons that this is harder to be done is because it's very hard um, to assess where the decision actually happened, because the only thing that we can confidently measure within the task and put our marker there is the moment where someone press the button. If you remember, once the options were displayed, the 6 options on the screen, participants had up to 5 seconds to make this decision. So they could make the decision in the first second, in the second, the third, or even the fourth second. And the only thing we could measure was the moment when they press the button. However, these early findings give some optimism that what we have recorded actually might be useful in revealing more in this area. So with the ERPs locked on decision, we recorded motor preparation and commitment. So during the decision moment, the button press, the ERPs revealed the neural cascade underlying choice and action, specifically the readiness potential that you can see it first here, appears as an early negative deflection, marking motor system preparation. This was followed by decision positivity, the central parietal, a hallmark of evidence accumulation and internal commitment to a choice. And it comes before the moment of pressing the button. It actually shows the moment when people felt confident that they have enough information and now they can go towards motoric preparation to actually make the choice with pressing of the button. The N2 reflected late-stage cognitive control and conflict monitoring, meaning that some of the people, even in that last moments, millisecond before pressing the button, still had like last thinking if this is the right choice. After the response, we saw a robust P3 choice ERP, as well as late positive component, reflecting context updating, feedback anticipation, and memory encoding. Because the participants knew that there would be jumps, they only didn't know when they will happen. So it was also important to try to remember what came before, what can come next, so they can prepare for the next decision. So because our data reveal a robust decision positivity at minus 175 milliseconds, it was 1.3 amplitude, showing that it is indeed possible to track these elusive neural signals at the decision moment in the entrepreneurial brain. This opens up new avenues for research into the neural basis of real-world decision-making and highlights the importance of studying not just how people learn from feedback, but also how they make decisions under uncertainty, a critical trait for successful entrepreneurs who actually chart their own path, and in real life they don't have 200 trials to try again and again to make it right. Sometimes they have only one choice. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, please let me know. There is much more to be evaluated here, but this is what I have so far.
Are there any questions, please? Okay. Thank you very much, Irena. This was your second presentation.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so we finished 40 minutes earlier. So,
I hope there will be more discussion so we can dive deeper.
yes, I hope so. But if there are not any questions, so I don't want to start to initiate, let's say, some discussion or some questions, because, okay, although I'm chairing this, I'm also your PhD supervisor, so I know pretty well your work and what you are doing. So it's not so, let's say, ethical to pose some questions. In any case, I will ask something that we have not discussed yet. So let's say that you finish this. What is your final goal here?
It will be very hard to let's say the neural responses can distinguish who has the potential to be successful entrepreneur, but in real life it will be very impractical to give this as a tool to um, startup clubs, to early entrepreneurs, to investor hubs, to schools, maybe. So what I want to try to see is to correlate to see if the neural data that we'll find actually explain the behavioral results into the during the decision making task, but also the scores on the successful founders startup scale, in order to create a solution that will be more practical and more easily applicable in real life. So kind of analyzing backward and forward. If the neural part help us to identify what would be the ideal behavior on the map task, we can run this map task easily, even without EEG, and find out who has that potential. The ultimate goal is not to use this information to discredit people that want to be entrepreneurs, but they have low potential, but actually to find the ones that have the higher potential and to help them with resources, with mentors, with networks, with whatever it's needed to create what they are envisioning, and to help them to gather the right team that might come from the other participants. However, the ones that have characteristics that are similar but still not highly there where they should be, we can use this tool to create entrepreneurial education that will help people, that will help aspiring entrepreneurs who are interested in this, but and have profiles that are somewhat similar, but still not on the right track. While the ones that have really different profiles, that are really more on the corporate operational side, it will be useful for them to direct them to be uh, either to go in the corporate career, or if they still prefer to work in the startup world, not to be the co-founder that will lead the startup, that will lead the idea, that will frame the vision, that will do that main, let's say, creative part, but to be the operational co-founder, the person who will, let's say, not explore, not think that broadly, but actually will take the goal and will fulfill it. Because these two profiles are complementary. And if we manage to identify these profiles early, we will help young people with their career choices and their respective roles, even within a startup, much more easily. So we have more successful startups and we will have more happy entrepreneurs and team members of startups.
Okay, thank you very much. We have Christos Teriadis, one question. Yes, Christo.
Okay, hi. Thank you, Irena, for the talk. I just have one question regarding the applicability of this, because you said that it wouldn't be practical to like use this kind of technology or in any case framework. And I was thinking, would it be possible this actually problems comes due to the problems with the EEG and with its high cost functionality that, you know, it's difficult to obtain an EEG equipment, but due to the fact that we now have a lot of EEG recorders, which are either, you know, of lower resolution, of course, but they have fewer electrodes, but they are actually, you know, portable. This type of technologies, would that be possible to implement the ERP analysis and generally this kind of analysis with fewer electrodes, maybe to just
Yes,
make it a little bit more accessible to?
That's something that we already have discussed with Manusos early on making something like this. But still more work will need to go into that to test the hardware part, the software part, then the easy analysis part, because it's not just to record, but someone to be able that is not proficient in EEG pre-processing, in EEG analyzing, to be able to analyze this data on the face of the place, let's say. So it will be great if we can create something like that. And I'm not that concerned. I am concerned on the EEG part, but I think that's solvable. Probably not everyone will be able to do it, but for sure we can have a couple of centers in one country that works with entrepreneurs, either with entrepreneurial education, or it's innovation fund, or it's accelerator, or it's angel clubs, where they can have like a dedicated rooms where we can have simplified EEG version, and then they can record this without a noise. The bigger concern is who will analyze then this data. Is it going to be on a online platform? There is more things that need to be developed in order to be easy, to be straightforward, for these kinds of data to be analyzed, and someone not to wait like 5 months to get their results back, but to be even, you know, the same day or within a short period of time. But yes, that's possible. However, what I see, if the neural information can help decide which profiles on the multi-arm bandit tasks are the ones that have that potential to be highly successful. That task can be performed even without EEG, and the interpretation of the results can be even programmed much faster, much more easier. So if we're speaking about some applicable solution, it will be like, this is step one, this is potential step 2. But definitely I think that there isn't, but I'm realistic. There is an option, but I'm realistic about the everything that will need to be developed and tuned in order for that idea to actually work without expert being present and working a lot of hours after. But that would be
Thank
ideal.
you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's what I had in mind. Also, with maybe some, you know, even for analysis, some streamlined processing of the data, either online or, as you said, that wouldn't be maybe the bigger issue of it. But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Irena. Let's see if Lakshmi is here, or if she's not here, we can have a break. Otherwise, we will, let's say, go 30 minutes earlier. Lakshmi, are you there? Probably not. So let's meet up again in 30 minutes. Okay, let's have 30-minute break and then have the presentation from Dr. Laxmi Shaw and Dr. Dimitrios Pinotsis.
Okay,
Thank you very much. See you in a bit. Bye-bye.